Live from the City of Angels here on this Sunday morning. It is midnight movie time, and we have a big surprise this weekend. And listen, I knew, and we all knew the sequel would do decent numbers, but this is above what everyone expected from Five Nights at Freddy's 2. It's $63 million. That is roughly $20 million or so more than many forecasts had this film. So this is a huge win. This is the biggest post-Thanksgiving debut in the history of Hollywood. So that's a huge story. Also, you see the other headline here from THR, Zootopia 2 is now at $915 million globally, and that is just after 2 weekends. So we are right in the face of that deal between Netflix and Warner Brothers that hopefully will fall apart. You have a weekend like this that is proof that theatrical is where people want to be if you give them the proper product. And yes, indeed, they did this weekend. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts on the debut here for Five Nights at Freddy's 2. When you throw in the international cash, you're talking about $109 million. This is a film that cost $36 million to produce. That means we are already profitable with the global debut here. This is going to be another smash for Universal, a moneymaker just like the first one. Will it get as high as the first? Probably not. I actually like the film more than the initial installment, but it looks like the average fan really dug this movie, and that's what we talked about back on Thursday night with the evaluation, that the FNAF crazies would appreciate this, and they did. And you're looking at a film here that did a ton of business, as you might expect, with the younger demo. Under 24 was a huge part of the crowd here. That is 74% of everyone who saw it was under the age of 25. And then you look at the diversity. It was across all the demos, 42% Caucasian, 35% Latino. So that's a nice breakdown. You typically see that with horror films. By the way, AMC Burbank, my home theater, number one with 64,000. That was early in the haul. It's more than that now. I'm going by Deadline's reporting here. But when you look at this, when we go to the Universal email, you can see everything that it did, and it did everything very big because, look, even Mexico came in with the number one of the second biggest horror opening of the year behind Conjuring Last Rites. Second biggest Universal horror opening all time, and second biggest Blumhouse opening all time behind FNAF, the first one. And then you can see all the other countries it did well. So this is a big win, huge win. Typically, this is a really quiet weekend right after Thanksgiving. You just have a little bit of a lull, and it was a huge, fortuitous event here this weekend to have this film drop. Now, when we talk about Zootopia 2, that is the other huge story. We've got 3 big stories today, and then some other important things to discuss. Zootopia 2, $43 million, down 57%. But as you go to the Disney email, guys, we're at $915.8 million globally. And this is where you go, what? You ready for the breakdown? $220.5 million domestic. International, $695.3. So you're talking about a 3-to-1 international cash. And guess who has the most money in on Zootopia? China. $430.4 million. It is the second largest American film ever in that market, only behind Endgame. And the way it's going, it might beat Endgame. So you talk about international being a huge part of the puzzle. Look at F1. Same thing happened with that film. Much bigger overseas than here in the States. And that's what's happening with Zootopia. The minus 57 does kind of give me a little pause here on the state side. But when you have the international cash that big, obviously Disney is thrilled. And then you look at China gets more of the cash, right? When you go to a communist country, they're going to take more of the money than the other countries that you put that film in. So that is not all money for Disney, but this is still a win for theatrical, obviously. Now, the thing that's not a win for theatrical, well, I mean, it's not losing money, but Wicked for Good is falling apart, and it's falling apart fast. As I go to the international and domestic numbers, it was down 73% this weekend, the third weekend. 73. This thing's following off so fast. $440 million worldwide on the global. Let me remind you that Wicked #1, so go to Box Office Mojo, ended up with $758 million. Wicked is not going to come close to that. It's likely going to be $200 million plus under that film. Here's what I think happened. It was too soon. Universal would have been better served to have put this film out in 2026. Because at that point, you've given moviegoers some time to regenerate interest in going back to the world. The fact that we were just here a year ago, it's too soon. And I think even me consuming this film, I felt that. And moviegoers are feeling that. So that was a release mistake by Universal. The film's not as good as the first thing. That's also an issue. The whole Ariana, that whole thing going back and forth, that was the interviews. It really burnt people out. Universal did not handle the rollout of this film well from every aspect, from the release date to all of the interviews and the weirdness that was going on between the two leads. And you just say to yourself, what could have prevented this from occurring? Well, first thing is to push it into 2026. But Wicked for Good will be on digital soon. You watch. I guarantee you that Universal will put this at home before Christmas. And they'll use these numbers as evidence why they can do that. Here's our reasoning. And that's one of the issues we've got to get control of. Listen, Warner Brothers, Netflix, that whole thing we'll talk about tonight. We've talked about it 2 streams. If you haven't seen that, go to Midnight Movie Talk on YouTube and you'll find all of that information for you. But when you look at the importance of windows, right? Letting the audience know that you're going to have to wait to get a movie at home. That's huge. And when you have Universal doing 17 days, 21 days, a month, I really want to see a 45-day window, but it's almost too late. You look at the CEO, Adam Aron, you look at everybody else, Regal and Cinemark. It's not just about AMC. The 3 of them should have banded together and had windows installed back in 2023. So this is the result of that. Jujutsu Kaisen, which is the new anime film, 10.2 million, much lower than the last 2 huge anime runaway smashes, but still a pretty good number to bring in here and help out with this weekend, which ended up being the biggest post-Thanksgiving weekend ever due to Freddy's and the return value of everything else in the marketplace, including Now You See Me 3, which is over $210 million on a global number. That's a $90 million film, so not quite at profitability yet, but it's getting close. That film's doing all of its business overseas. Same thing that we're seeing with Zootopia, a crazy international to domestic multiple, and that's why we get a number 3 and possibly a number 4. Lionsgate has nothing else to operate with, so why wouldn't they, right? Kill Bill, the whole bloody affair, all 4 hours of it, number 6 at 3.3 million. I do want to call your attention as we go to the top 10 to the film that is at number 7, Eternity, a film that I liked. And I had a feeling this might happen. It was down just 14% this weekend. That is a stellar hold. You don't see that kind of hold very often, right? A good hold is minus 30, a very good hold. Minus 14, but listen, it's still not doing a lot of money per location, 1,100 per, okay? But the number of minus 14 tells me that, hey, people are talking about it. There's an option you can go see a smaller film, romantic comedy, smart, has emotion. I like that film. I'd say A24's most accessible film ever. without question. So that's your number 7 film. Quickly, top 10 one more time. Fred Nights at Freddy's. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is number 1 with 18,500 per. We'll call it that. 63 million. That is better than expected. You know, you look at that film again. The initial forecasts were around 45, 50 would be the high end, and you're at 63. So that's a win. Zootopia 2 down 57% with 220 million. Wicked for Good. That's the total. The total on the weekend was 43 million for that film. Wicked for Good is number 3 at nearly 300 million. And then we listed off the rest of the top 10. The other big news here this weekend, well, as I look at it, there's not a whole lot more. There was a small film called Fackham Hall, which only had 3 screenings at Burbank per day. That's not good. And the film really bombed. It did horrible. Again, these small films are just getting crushed. Even Eternity at 1,100 per, that's not a great number, right? So it's important that when we talk about these things that you understand the overall snapshot instead of just pretending we focus on that minus 14. We talk about it's only doing 1,100 per. That's not a lot of people in each movie theater. So that is key. All right, guys, listen. Back here tonight, talk about Warner Brothers and Netflix. That deal, could it all be a big sham? Could the entire thing be a stall tactic by Netflix? That's our discussion tonight, in addition to a possible early review of a movie that doesn't come out until January. I got to get clearance on that. I'll let you know tonight. Until then, enjoy your Sunday. I'm off to the beach to play some volleyball. Peace out. Hopefully it's warm where you are. It's beautiful here in LA. One of the best things about living out here. Everything else kind of sucks. But the weather, that's a win. See you next time on